First contact. Admiral Zevek stood motionless on the command deck of the Indomitable, flagship of the Galactic Hegemony's 7th Fleet. His 4 eyes narrowed at the holographic display before him, outer lids blinking rapidly in what his officers recognized as barely contained anxiety. "Confirm that reading," he ordered, voice steady despite his obvious concern. Lieutenant Therax's tentacles danced across the console. "Confirmed, Admiral. Unknown vessel holding position at coordinates 734921 by 882264, just within the outer boundary of hegemony space. It's not responding to standard identification protocols." The bridge fell silent. In over 3 centuries of the hegemony's dominance, no unauthorized vessel had ever penetrated their borders. The concept was almost unthinkable. Their sensor networks extended for light years in every direction. Their patrol routes were meticulous, their border defenses impenetrable. "Magnification," Zevek commanded. The hologram zoomed in, revealing a sleek vessel of unfamiliar design. It was smaller than the smallest hegemony destroyer, yet its whole configuration suggested advanced propulsion systems and what appeared to be weapons arrays unlike anything in the hegemony's extensive database of known species and their technologies. "Origin?" Zevek asked, knowing the answer before hearing it. "Unknown, sir. Design matches nothing in our records." Commander Vrexel, Zevek's second-in-command, stepped closer to the display. "Perhaps a new Kraltek design. They'd been pushing boundaries lately." Zevek shook his head. The Kraltek signed the Technology Development Treaty. They wouldn't risk violating it. He zoomed the display further. "Besides, this is different, not an evolution of known technology." "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the vessel. Audio and visual." Zevek straightened his uniform. On screen, a holographic display shifted, and collective gasps echoed across the bridge. The face that appeared was startlingly alien, yet disturbingly familiar. Bipedal, symmetrical features, 2 eyes, a singular mouth, primitive characteristics common among less evolved species. But there was something in those eyes, something that made Zevek's spinal ridge stiffen. "Greetings," the creature spoke in perfect standard Galactic, though its mouth moved strangely around the words. "This is Captain Elena Reyes of the Earth vessel Pathfinder. We come in peace and seek diplomatic contact with the governing authority of this region of space." Silence gripped the bridge. Earth. The name meant nothing to any of them. Zevek found his voice. "This is Admiral Zevek of the Galactic Hegemony. Your vessel has entered restricted space without authorization. Identify your species and system of origin immediately." The alien, Captain Rice, smiled slightly. "We are humans from the planet Earth in the Sol system. We understand this may be surprising. Our records indicate this is our first official contact with your civilization." "Impossible," Vrexel whispered. "The Sol system is in Sector 47G. That's primitive territory, pre-FTL species only." Zevek muted the transmission. "Scan their vessel. Full spectrum." Moments later, Lieutenant Therax looked up from his console, all 4 of his arms frozen in mid-motion. "Admiral, their drive signature is like nothing we've ever recorded. Energy output exceeds our largest battlecruiser. And there's something else, some kind of field surrounding the hull. It's bending our sensor beams. Weapons? Unknown configurations, but energy readings suggest capabilities at least equivalent to our mid-range destroyers." Zevek unmuted the transmission. "Captain Rice, the Sol system is categorized as containing only pre-spaceflight civilizations. Your presence here contradicts all hegemony intelligence." Captain Rice nodded. "Yes, we've maintained that impression deliberately. It seemed prudent given the complex politics of this region. However, we've reached a point in our development where isolation no longer serves our interests. We wish to establish formal relations." Zevek felt cold. This small vessel, this human, was casually admitting to deceiving the most powerful civilization in known space. The implications were staggering. "You will hold position while we verify your claims," Zevek ordered. "Any movement will be considered hostile action." "Understood, Admiral. We'll wait for your response." The transmission ended. Zevek turned to his senior staff. "Contact High Command immediately. Priority Alpha. And dispatch reconnaissance drones to the Sol system. I want to know everything about these humans." 6 hours later, Zevek stared at the incoming data with mounting disbelief. The reconnaissance drones had confirmed the unthinkable. The supposedly primitive Sol system was anything but. They detected a complex network of orbital habitats around multiple planets, massive energy signatures suggesting advanced industrial activity, and a defensive grid that had actually detected and allowed the hegemony drones to pass. "They knew we were watching them," Vrexel said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "All these years, they knew." The secured transmission from High Command only deepened the mystery. Supreme Commander Axeler's expression was grave. "Admiral Zevek, your discovery has triggered a Level 1 security protocol. What I'm about to tell you is classified beyond your current clearance, but circumstances require disclosure. The species calling themselves humans have been subject to special containment directives for the past 3 centuries. Zevek blinked in surprise. "Containment, Supreme Commander. I have no record of such a directive. Because it was implemented at the highest levels of government and restricted to need-to-know basis. 300 years ago, a hegemony exploration vessel encountered the human homeworld. Initial assessment suggested a pre-industrial species of no particular concern. However, further observation revealed troubling characteristics." "What characteristics, sir?" Axeler's secondary eyes closed, a sign of extreme discomfort among his species. Adaptability beyond any known sentient pattern. Technological progression at rates that defied our predictive models. And most concerning, a capacity for violence that our xenopsychologists found disturbing. The decision was made to quarantine their system, to monitor but never contact, to ensure they remained isolated until we better understood their potential. And now they're here, Zevek said, with technology that shouldn't be possible. Yes, this represents a catastrophic intelligence failure. Axeler leaned closer to the transmission pickup. Your orders are to establish a containment perimeter. Additional fleets are being dispatched. Under no circumstances are you to allow that vessel to depart. Use of lethal force is authorized if necessary. After the transmission ended, Zevek returned to the bridge, his mind racing. The small human vessel suddenly seemed far more dangerous than its size suggested. "Sir," Lieutenant Therax reported as soon as Zevek entered, "the human vessel is transmitting again. They're requesting permission to send a diplomatic shuttle to the Indomitable." Zevek stared at the distant pinpoint of light on the main display, one small ship that had just upended centuries of hegemony certainty. "Permission granted," he said finally. "Prepare security teams, and alert medical to establish quarantine protocols." As the human shuttle approached, Zevek couldn't shake a growing sense of foreboding. The hegemony had encountered thousands of species across its long history, conquered hundreds of worlds, assimilated countless civilizations into its hierarchy. But never had they faced a species that had hidden in plain sight, developing in secret until they chose to reveal themselves. It violated every pattern, every expectation. It suggested a level of strategic thinking that was unsettling. The shuttle docked with perfect precision, its systems interfacing with hegemony technology, as if designed specifically for compatibility. When the airlock opened, Captain Alina Reyes stepped through, flanked by 2 other humans. They wore simple uniforms with no visible weapons, yet they carried themselves with unmistakable confidence. "Admiral Zevek," Reyes said, offering a shallow bow. "Thank you for receiving us. I believe we have much to discuss about humanity's place in the galaxy." Zevek studied the humans carefully. They looked so physically unimposing. No natural armor, no claws, no evident strengths beyond basic vital mobility. Yet something about them radiated danger in a way he couldn't articulate. "Indeed we do, Captain," he replied formally. "Beginning with how a supposedly primitive species has managed to deceive the hegemony for centuries." Reyes smiled, and Zevik was struck by how the simple facial expression could seem simultaneously friendly and predatory. "Admiral," she said, "that's actually quite a long story. Perhaps we should sit down." As he led the humans to the conference room, Zevik couldn't escape the feeling that the galaxy had just fundamentally changed, and that the hegemony's long reign of unchallenged dominance might be coming to an end. Diplomatic tensions. The conference room aboard the Indomitable hummed with tension. Admiral Zevik sat rigidly at the head of the oval table, flanked by Commander Vrexel and his senior staff. Across from them, Captain Alina Reyes and her two companions, introduced as Science Officer Dr. Kiran Patel and Security Chief Major Tomas Rodriguez, appeared remarkably at ease. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," Zevik began. "Your presence here represents a significant security breach. Explain how humans have developed advanced spacefaring technology without our knowledge." Captain Rice folded her hands neatly on the table. "Admiral, may I first clarify something? You speak as though humanity has somehow infiltrated your territory illicitly. The reality is that your hegemony placed our species under surveillance without our consent and deliberately isolated us from galactic society." Zevik's secondary eyelids flickered, a sign of agitation his species couldn't easily suppress. The containment protocol was implemented for the safety of all parties. Was it? Dr. Patel spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a gentle cadence that contrasted with his direct words. Or was it implemented because the hegemony recognized something in humanity that it feared? Before Zevik could respond, the door to the conference room slid open. A tall, gaunt figure entered, diplomatic envoy Trezix, dispatched urgently from the nearest hegemony administrative world. His elongated skull and pale, almost translucent skin marked him as a member of the Arlaxian species, renowned for their diplomatic skills. "My apologies for the interruption," Trezix said, bowing slightly. "I was advised to join these discussions immediately upon my arrival." Zevik nodded stiffly. "The envoy will be handling further communications." "How convenient," Major Rodriguez murmured, just loudly enough to be heard. Trezix settled into a seat and fixed the humans with an evaluative stare. "I understand you claim to represent the sovereign authority of Earth. What exactly are your intentions toward the hegemony?" "Our intentions are simple," Captain Rice replied. "We seek recognition as an independent spacefaring civilization, free access to trade routes, and exchange of scientific knowledge. And if these terms are not met," Trezix asked smoothly. Rice smiled. "We're optimistic they will be. Humanity prefers peaceful coexistence. Yet you approach us with advanced weaponry on a vessel that deliberately evaded our detection systems," Commander Vrexel interjected. "These are not the actions of a species seeking peaceful coexistence." "Consider our perspective," Dr. Patel countered. "We discovered decades ago that an alien power had quarantined our system and was monitoring our development without our knowledge. Would you approach such a power unarmed?" Diplomatic envoy Trezix raised a placating hand. "Perhaps we should focus on practical matters. The Hegemony Council will require time to consider Earth's status. In the meantime, your vessel must remain here under observation." "That's unacceptable," Captain Rice said flatly. "The Pathfinder will maintain its position, but we will not submit to detention or boarding. Furthermore, we expect a formal response within 72 standard hours." Trezix's expression hardened. "You are not in a position to make demands, Captain." "Aren't we?" Rice leaned forward slightly. "Envoy Trezix, are you familiar with the Aldebaran incident of 60 years ago? Or perhaps the mysterious disappearance of the survey vessel Intrepid in the Ta City system?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Both events were classified hegemony operations that had ended in disaster. Events no pre-contact species should know about. Trezix recovered quickly. "I'm not sure what tales you've heard in your isolated system. Captain, but we have detailed records of both incidents, Rice continued, including sensor logs from our observation posts. We also have extensive files on hegemony fleet movements, colonial administrations, and resource extraction operations throughout this sector. For a supposedly primitive species, we've been quite thorough in our intelligence gathering. Admiral Zevik felt a cold sensation spreading through his thorax. The implications were staggering. If humans had been monitoring hegemony operations without detection, what other capabilities had they developed in secret? You claim to want peaceful relations, Zevik said slowly, yet you begin with implied threats. Not threats, Admiral. Context. Captain Rice's expression softened slightly. We understand the hegemony's concern. A new spacefaring species appearing suddenly would disturb any established power. But we've had centuries to observe how your civilization treats those it considers inferior. The quarantine you imposed gave us time to prepare accordingly. Dr. Patel reached into a small case and removed a data crystal, sliding it across the table. As a gesture of good faith, this contains information on a spatial anomaly forming in Sector 23. Your scientists would classify it as a Class IV subspace rupture. It will become detectable to your instruments in approximately 6 months, but by then, it will be too late to prevent significant damage to nearby systems. Trazix picked up the crystal warily, and humans can detect such phenomena before the hegemony sensor network. Our approach to subspace physics differs from yours, Dr. Patel said simply. We prioritized certain research directions based on our unique perspective. The meeting continued for another hour, an increasingly tense exchange of carefully worded diplomatic positions. When the humans finally returned to their shuttle, Admiral Zevik and Envoy Trazix watched from the observation deck as it departed. Their vessel is significantly more advanced than they're admitting, Zevik said quietly. And they know too much about us. Trazix nodded slowly. The containment directive was clearly a catastrophic failure. The question now is what to do about it. High Command is sending additional fleets, 5 at last count. A show of force may be premature, Trazix cautioned. If they've been studying us for as long as they claim, they've surely prepared contingencies. Zevik turned to face the diplomat directly. Do you believe their claim about the subspace anomaly? Our scientists are analyzing the data now. If it's accurate, it would represent a significant technological advantage. The ability to detect such phenomena months before our systems could, giving them a strategic edge in any conflict, Zevik finished. They could predict stellar events we couldn't see coming. There's more, Trazix said, his voice dropping further. Before this meeting, I reviewed the original containment directive, the complete file, not the redacted version most officials see. The exploration vessel that first discovered Earth reported something disturbing about human history. What? In the span of just a few thousand years, a mere instant in evolutionary terms, humans advanced from primitive agrarian societies to early industrialization. They fought global wars with increasingly sophisticated weapons. Their rate of technological adaptation was unprecedented. Many species experience accelerated development phases, Zevik noted. Not like this, Trazix insisted. The xenobiologists who studied them projected that without intervention, humans might achieve interstellar capability within 5 centuries. The containment directive was implemented because the prediction was deemed impossible, a flaw in the model. But if they're here now, then the prediction was correct, Zevik said grimly. Or perhaps too conservative. Aboard the human shuttle returning to the Pathfinder, Captain Rice and her team sat in contemplative silence until they were well clear of the hegemony flagship. That went exactly as expected, Major Rodriguez said finally. They're scared, confused, and already planning how to neutralize us. Dr. Patel ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. The data crystal should buy us some time. They'll need to verify the information, and that will take weeks with their current technology. By which time the rest of the fleet will be in position, Rice nodded. Did you detect any unusual scans during the meeting? Multiple, Rodriguez confirmed. They were trying to analyze everything from our body chemistry to the composition of our uniforms. Their medical officer was particularly interested in you, Captain. Standard procedure when encountering new species, Paddle remarked. They're looking for weaknesses. Rice stared out at the stars as the Pathfinder grew larger in their viewport. After 3 centuries of watching and waiting, it's strange to finally be here, talking to them directly. Having second thoughts about first contact protocol? Rodriguez asked. Not at all, Rice replied firmly. The hegemony's response confirms everything our observers reported. They don't see other species as equals. They see them as potential threats or resources to be managed. If we'd revealed ourselves any earlier, they would have invaded Earth while we were still vulnerable, Patel finished. The quarantine was the best thing that could have happened to us. And now? Rodriguez pressed. Captain Rice smiled grimly. Now we proceed as planned. The hegemony will attempt to assert dominance. It's the only response their system allows. When they do, we'll be ready to show them exactly what humanity is capable of. As the shuttle docked with the Pathfinder, a message was already being transmitted through subspace channels undetectable to hegemony sensors, a simple confirmation code that would launch the next phase of humanity's carefully orchestrated emergence onto the galactic stage. Back on the Indomitable, Admiral Zevik received an urgent communication from High Command. The Supreme Commander's expression was grim. We've completed deep space scans of the Sol system, he reported without preamble. What we found is concerning. The humans have established presence not just on their homeworld and its satellite, but throughout their system. Mars, Venus, the gas giants, all show signs of extensive development. And there's more. We've detected energy signatures consistent with FTL technology at multiple points throughout their system. How many vessels? Zevik asked. We can't get accurate readings, but conservative estimates suggest a fleet of at least 50 major vessels, with countless smaller craft. Their defensive grid is substantial, more advanced than our frontier systems. Zevik absorbed this in stunned silence before asking the question weighing on his mind. How did we miss this? They appear to have developed technology specifically designed to confound our sensor systems, the Supreme Commander replied. As if they'd been studying our detection capabilities for centuries and built countermeasures accordingly. Which was exactly what Captain Rice had implied, Zevik realized. The humans hadn't just developed in isolation. They had been preparing specifically for eventual contact with the hegemony. Your orders, Supreme Commander. Contain the human vessel at all costs. The reinforcement fleets will arrive within 48 hours. Once they're in position, we'll neutralize this threat before it can spread. The very stability of the hegemony depends on it. As the transmission ended, Admiral Zevik gazed out at the stars, toward the tiny point of light that was the human vessel Pathfinder. It seemed so insignificant against the backdrop of space, yet it had single-handedly upended centuries of hegemony certainty. What are you planning? He whispered to the distant ship, knowing no answer would come. But deep in his core, Admiral Zevik had the unsettling feeling that whatever game the humans were playing, they were several moves ahead. The hidden history. Inside the Grand Archives on Hegemony Prime, Archivist Silana moved swiftly through the restricted section, her 6-fingered hands trembling slightly as she input her highest clearance codes. The terminal hummed, verifying her identity before revealing a hidden database that few in the hegemony even knew existed. Computer, access file designation Earth Omega, she whispered. Authorization, Silana 793. Access granted. The system responded. Warning. Content classified beyond your standard clearance. Emergency protocol override accepted. Proceeding with retrieval. Silana glanced nervously at the entrance. She had mere minutes before her unauthorized access would trigger security protocols. The human vessel's appearance had activated dormant systems throughout the hegemony's administrative networks, systems designed centuries ago for precisely this contingency. The screen before her filled with data, ancient reports, classified directives, and video logs dating back over 300 years. She downloaded everything to a secure crystal and was about to disconnect when a final file appeared, unlocking itself automatically. It was labeled simply, "First Contact Warning." The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a much younger version of Grand Archon Zilix, the legendary leader who had expanded the hegemony from a loose confederation of worlds to the dominant power in the galaxy. His recording was dated just days after the initial Earth discovery. "If this message is being accessed," Zilix began, "then the containment protocol has failed. The species designating themselves humans have achieved interstellar capability despite our efforts. This represents the gravest threat the hegemony has faced in its history." Silana stared, transfixed, as the revered leader continued. "Our initial assessment of Earth revealed a species unlike any we have encountered. While technologically primitive at the time of discovery, humans demonstrated adaptation rates that defied all evolutionary models. More concerning were their historical patterns. Where most intelligent species evolved toward cooperation as they developed, humans continued to engage in large-scale conflicts throughout their advancement. Their capacity for simultaneously creating brilliant innovations and devising new ways to destroy one another was unsettling." Zilix's expression grew darker. But what truly alarmed our researchers was the human response to adversity. When subjected to simulation models of resource scarcity, environmental collapse, or external threats, most species either declined rapidly or stabilized at lower technology levels. Humans, however, consistently accelerated their development when facing existential challenges. Their historical record confirms this pattern repeatedly. The recording continued, outlining the hegemony's decision to quarantine Earth rather than follow standard protocols for pre-spaceflight civilizations, which typically involved either open contact or subtle guidance. "Our predictive models showed a 78% probability that open contact would result in humans rapidly adopting and improving our technology, potentially surpassing hegemony capabilities within generations. The alternative, destroying their civilization while still primitive, was rejected as both ethically unconscionable and strategically dangerous, given our incomplete understanding of human potential." Zilix leaned closer to the recording device, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "If you are viewing this, then the worst has occurred. Humans have overcome our containment measures and developed interstellar technology independently. The protocols attached to this message must be implemented immediately. The hegemony's survival depends on it." The screen shifted to display a series of directives, emergency measures designed to counter human expansion. Silana downloaded these as well, her professional detachment giving way to growing horror as she read the proposed actions. The terminal suddenly flashed red. "Security alert. Unauthorized access detected. Containment protocols engaging." Silana grabbed the data crystal and fled, making it through the archive's back passages just moments before the security lockdown engage. Her mind raced with what she had discovered. The protocols weren't just defensive measures. They outlined a comprehensive plan to eliminate humanity entirely, deeming coexistence impossible. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Zevik received an encrypted transmission from an unknown source within the hegemony government. The sender identification had been scrubbed, but the security codes were authentic and of the highest clearance level. "This is irregular," Commander Vrexel noted as Zevik authorized the decryption. "These are irregular times," Zevik replied grimly. When the data finished processing, he dismissed all other officers from his private quarters. "Leave us." Once alone, Zevik and Vrexel reviewed the contents in stunned silence. The historical records, the classified reports, the secret directives, all pointed to a truth that had been hidden from even the highest levels of the current hegemony leadership. The containment wasn't just a quarantine, Vrexel said finally. It was fear. They were afraid of what humans might become, and with good reason, it seems. Zevik gestured to one of the simulation models from the original research team. It showed human technological progression with and without external pressure. The difference was striking. Under threat, human advancement accelerated exponentially. If these models are accurate, Vrexel whispered, then by quarantining Earth and creating a permanent perceived threat, we may have inadvertently created exactly what the original directive was trying to prevent. Zevik finished. A human civilization that developed specifically to counter hegemony technology. The final section of the data, the emergency protocols, outlined a chilling response. Immediate and overwhelming military action against Earth and all human outposts, using weapons banned by hegemony law for the past millennium. This can't be sanctioned policy, Vrexel said. These measures violate every principle of civilization the hegemony claims to uphold. Zevik stared at the display, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of deep distress in his species. Yet 5 battle fleets are already converging on our position, with orders to neutralize a single human vessel. If these protocols have been activated, a priority alert interrupted them. Admiral, Lieutenant Therax's voice came through the comm system. We're detecting unusual activity from the human ship. On the bridge, the tactical display showed the Pathfinder surrounded by a faint energy field that hadn't been present before. Analysis, Zevik demanded. Unknown, sir. It's not a weapon signature or shield configuration we recognize. But it's causing distortions in subspace, almost like. Like what, Lieutenant? Like they're communicating, sir, but not through any channels we can detect. Zevik felt a chill run through him. Communicating with whom? Before Therax could respond, another alert sounded. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting multiple signature spikes at the edge of the system. Energy patterns consistent with translocation events. Show me, Zevik ordered. The main display shifted to show distant points of light appearing where nothing had been moments before. As the sensors focused, the points resolved into ships, dozens of them, then hundreds, materializing in perfect formation. That's impossible, Vrexel breathed. No species can coordinate a fleet translocation of that precision. Yet the evidence was undeniable. A human fleet had just arrived, bypassing all hegemony early warning systems, appearing as if from nowhere. Admiral, Communications Officer Zorva called. We're receiving a transmission from the new vessels. They're identifying themselves as the Earth Defense Fleet. On screen, Zevik ordered, straightening his posture. The face that appeared was human, but older than Captain Rice, a man with weathered features and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet, he began without preamble. We've received Captain Rice's signal and understand that diplomatic discussions are underway. We are taking position to ensure these discussions continue peacefully. Zevik maintained his composure, though inside he felt a growing sense of dread. This is Admiral Zevik of the Galactic Hegemony. Your fleet's presence represents an act of military aggression. Admiral Chen smiled slightly. No more aggressive than the 5 hegemony battle fleets currently en route to this position, Admiral. We're simply ensuring a balanced conversation. How did you? Zevik stopped himself. Of course they knew about the reinforcements. If humans had been monitoring hegemony communications for centuries, little would escape their notice. What are your intentions? Exactly as Captain Rice stated, peaceful coexistence, but on equal terms, not as a subjugated species. Chen's expression hardened slightly. We've studied your history extensively, Admiral. We know what happens to civilizations the hegemony deems potentially destabilizing. On a secondary channel, Vrexel whispered urgently, Sir, preliminary count shows over 300 vessels in the human fleet. Multiple classes, all of unknown configuration. Zevik maintained his focus on Admiral Chen. If peace is truly your intention, withdrawing your fleet would demonstrate good faith. Just as the hegemony could demonstrate good faith by canceling its incoming reinforcements, Chen countered smoothly. But we both know that won't happen. 300 years of containment policy won't be reversed in a day. An alert flashed on Zevek's private terminal. A message from Supreme Command marked highest priority. He glanced down quickly, reading the first line. Implement Directive Omega immediately. Authorization granted for all necessary force. Looking back at the human admiral, Zevek made a decision that would alter the course of galactic history. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should expand our diplomatic discussions to include fleet commanders. A mutual de-escalation might be possible. Admiral Chen nodded, seeming to understand the significance of Zevek's offer. I believe that would be productive. Captain Rice has already laid groundwork that we can build upon. After the transmission ended, Commander Vrexel approached Zevek. Admiral, the Supreme Command's orders were clear. We are to implement Directive Omega, not expand negotiations. I've seen Directive Omega, Zevek replied quietly. It was created from fear 3 centuries ago, based on predictions of what humans might become. Now we're facing what they actually are. A species that developed advanced technology, while under constant threat, technology specifically designed to counter our own. If we follow Directive Omega, we won't be containing a threat. We'll be starting a war we may not win. Vrexel studied his commander carefully. The reinforcement fleets won't share your perspective. They'll arrive with orders to attack. Then we have 48 hours to find a better solution, Zevek said grimly. Because if those fleets engage the humans, I fear the hegemony as we know it will not survive the outcome. As the indomitable sensors continued tracking the massive human fleet that had appeared from nowhere, Admiral Zevek couldn't help but wonder what other surprises humanity had developed during their centuries of isolation, and what it would mean for the galaxy's future. Battle of Wits. The neutral space station Concordia floated at precisely equal distance between the hegemony's Indomitable and the human flagship Horizon. Originally a deep space research facility abandoned decades ago, it now served as the unlikely venue for negotiations that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Admiral Zevek entered the central chamber accompanied only by Commander Vrexel and diplomatic envoy Trezix. The humans had already arrived. Admiral Chen, Captain Rice, and a third individual introduced as Director Lian Zhang of Earth Intelligence. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Admiral Chen began once formalities were exchanged. We believe it serves both our interests to avoid conflict. A sentiment the hegemony shares, Envoy Trezix replied smoothly. Though your fleet's presence makes peaceful resolution challenging. Director Zhang, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes, spoke for the first time. No more challenging than the 5 hegemony battle fleets currently approaching at maximum speed, each carrying planet-killer-class weapons prohibited by your own galactic accord. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. The humans shouldn't have known about those weapons. Their existence was classified at the highest levels of hegemony command. I don't know what intelligence you believe you've. Trezix began. Please, Zhang interrupted, her voice remaining perfectly calm. Let's not waste time with denials. We've been monitoring hegemony communications and weapons development for over 2 centuries. We know about Project Sunforge. We know about the antimatter cascade generators. We know about Directive Omega. Zevek felt a chill run through him. Those programs represented the hegemony's most closely guarded secrets, weapons designed as absolute last resorts against existential threats. If you truly seek peace, Zevek said carefully, then perhaps explaining how humans developed such extensive intelligence capabilities might build trust. Admiral Chen nodded. A fair request. The truth is both simple and complex. When your exploration vessel first discovered Earth 300 years ago, they believed their observation was undetected. It wasn't. Impossible. Vrexel objected. Earth was pre-industrial at the time. You had no technology capable of detecting our stealth systems. Not technological detection, Captain Rice clarified. Human detection. The Hegemony vessel's commander made contact with a small group of humans, believing them to be primitive tribal leaders whose accounts would be dismissed as superstition. Director Zhang continued the explanation. Those individuals were actually members of an ancient order dedicated to watching the skies, astronomers and philosophers who had long theorized that Earth was not alone in the universe. They documented everything, preserved the knowledge, and passed it through generations. Over the decades that followed, Admiral Chen added, as humanity advanced technologically, these accounts guided our development. When we detected your automated monitoring satellites in Earth orbit, we didn't destroy them. We studied them, learned from them, and eventually began feeding them carefully crafted data while concealing our true progress. Zevik processed this with growing amazement. You're saying that humans knew about the hegemony before they developed space travel. Knowledge of your existence became our greatest motivator, Rice confirmed. Throughout human history, our greatest advances have come in response to challenges and threats. The knowledge that a vastly powerful alien civilization was watching us, one that had chosen containment rather than contact, that became the ultimate challenge. Director Zhang opened a small device that projected a holographic timeline. By the time your historians believe we were developing basic orbital capabilities, we had already established colonies throughout our solar system. When your records show we were testing our first interplanetary vessels, we were actually perfecting FTL travel. And for the past century, while the hegemony believed Earth remained safely contained, we were expanding outward, carefully, quietly, always avoiding detection. All of this, Commander Vrexel said incredulously, because we chose not to make contact. Because you chose to quarantine us, Admiral Chen corrected, to deny us our rightful place among spacefaring civilizations based on predictions and fears rather than reality. You made yourselves our adversary before we'd even left our planet. A tense silence fell over the chamber. The implications were staggering, not just for current negotiations, but for the hegemony's fundamental approach to galactic governance. What are your demands? Trezix finally asked. Not demands. Proposals. Admiral Chen's tone remained measured. First, formal recognition of Earth and all human colonies as sovereign territory. Second, full access to hegemony trade routes and scientific exchanges. Third, the immediate cancellation of Directive Omega and all related protocols. And if these terms are rejected? Zevik asked. Director Zhang smiled thinly. They won't be, Admiral. Not once the Hegemony Council understands the true situation. With practiced precision, Zhang activated another holographic display, this one showing thousands of points of light scattered throughout the galaxy. These are human outposts, colonies, and observation posts established over the past century. Many are located near critical hegemony infrastructure. Others monitor key trade routes or resource worlds. The revelation struck Zevik like a physical blow. If this was true, humans hadn't just escaped containment. They had embedded themselves throughout hegemony space without detection. This is a bluff, Vrexel declared. No species could establish such presence without triggering countless alerts. We designed our technology specifically to avoid triggering those alerts, Captain Rice explained. Every sensor pattern, every detection algorithm the hegemony uses, we studied them all and built our systems to operate in their blind spots. Admiral Chen leaned forward slightly. We don't share this to threaten you, Admiral Zevik. We share it to help you understand why conflict would be disastrous for both our civilizations. The incoming hegemony fleets believe they're facing a single human vessel and perhaps a few hundred ships. The reality is vastly different. As if on cue, a priority alert chimed on Zevik's communicator. The message from Tactical Command was brief but devastating. Sensors were suddenly detecting human vessels throughout the sector. Ships that had apparently been there all along but somehow invisible to hegemony systems until now. A demonstration, Director Zhang explained calmly. We constructed some of our vessels to allow your sensors to detect them. Not all, just enough to verify our claims. The implications were clear. If humans could hide their ships at will, the approaching hegemony fleets would be fighting an enemy they couldn't fully see or track. Why reveal yourselves now? Trezix asked. If you've developed in secret this long, why not continue? Because isolation has served its purpose, Admiral Chen replied. Humanity has reached a point where further advancement requires interaction with the wider galaxy. We need to trade, to exchange ideas, to participate in galactic civilization. We've prepared as best we could, but now we seek integration, not opposition. Zevik studied the humans carefully. Everything about this situation defied hegemony protocols and predictions. The containment directive had assumed humans would eventually develop interstellar capability and attempt to break quarantine, but no one had anticipated they would do so with such thorough preparation, turning the hegemony's own secrecy against it. I must consult with Supreme Command, Zevik said finally. Of course, Admiral Chen nodded. But be aware that we're monitoring all communications. If orders are given to implement Directive Omega, we will take immediate defensive action. The threat was clear, yet delivered without hostility, simply a statement of fact. As Zevik and his officers prepared to return to the Indomitable, Captain Rice approached him privately. Admiral, she said quietly, there's something else you should understand. The hegemony isn't the only galactic-powered humans have contacted. Zevik froze. Explain. During our expansion, we encountered other species, civilizations the hegemony had deemed too primitive for contact or too distant to be worth conquering. We've established relations with many of them, shared technology, formed alliances. You're claiming humans have built a coalition against the hegemony. Rai shook her head. Not against you. Independent of you. A network of civilizations developing without hegemony oversight or control. We call it the Alliance of Free Worlds. As this final revelation sank in, Zevik realized that the galaxy he had served his entire life, a galaxy with the hegemony at its unquestioned center, had been an illusion. Beyond their sight, a parallel galactic community had been forming, with humanity as its catalyst. Back aboard the Indomitable, Zevik faced the most difficult communication of his career. On the secure channel, Supreme Commander Axelar's expression darkened as Zevik relayed what he had learned. This is preposterous, Axelar declared. No species could have achieved what these humans claim. Your judgment is compromised, Admiral. The evidence is before us, Zevik insisted. Our sensors are detecting human vessels throughout the sector, ships that were invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. If they can hide their presence so completely, then their other claims become credible. Even if true, it changes nothing. Axelar replied coldly. The reinforcement fleets will arrive in 20 hours. Directive Omega will proceed as planned. The hegemony cannot allow such a threat to exist, regardless of its scale. Supreme Commander, with respect, implementing Directive Omega against a force this dispersed and advanced would not eliminate the threat. It would guarantee full-scale war, a war we may not be prepared to win. Axelar's expression hardened further. Your duty is to follow orders, Admiral, not question them. Prepare your fleet to coordinate with the reinforcements. After the transmission ended, Zevik stood in silence, the weight of galaxies on his shoulders. Throughout his career, he had served the hegemony with unwavering loyalty, believing in its mission to maintain order and stability. Now he faced a choice that would define not just his legacy, but potentially the future of all civilized space. Commander Vrexel, he said finally, begin evacuating all non-essential personnel to the outer system. And send a message to Admiral Chen. Tell him, he paused, the words feeling strange yet necessary. Tell him I request a private meeting. There are matters we must discuss, matters that may determine whether our civilizations face war or peace. As Vrexel hurried to carry out the orders, Admiral Zevik gazed out at the stars, where human ships now blinked into and out of sensor range, a technological display of hide and seek that demonstrated their capabilities more effectively than any threat could have. For 3 centuries, the hegemony had feared what humanity might become. Now Zevek would have to decide whether to embrace that reality or fight against it, and in doing so, determine the future of galactic civilization itself. A new galactic order. The observation deck of the Concordia station offered a panoramic view of the standoff. The impressive bulk of the hegemony's Indomitable on one side, the sleek lines of the human flagship Horizon on the other. Between them floated smaller vessels from both fleets, positioning and repositioning in a silent dance of military strategy. Admiral Zevek stood alone, waiting. He had made his decision, though the weight of it still pressed upon him. 300 years of policy, centuries of hegemony doctrine, all to be undone by his actions today. If he was wrong, he would be remembered as the greatest traitor in hegemony history. If he was right, there might not be a hegemony left to remember him at all. A remarkable view, isn't it? Admiral Chen's voice came from behind him. Zevek turned to find the human admiral approaching, unaccompanied, a gesture of trust that matched his own. I'd always found there's something humbling about seeing ships in space, Chen continued, moving to stand beside Zevek at the viewport. Reminders that no matter how advanced we become, we're still tiny compared to the universe we're trying to understand. A philosophical perspective, Zevek noted, not common among military commanders. Perhaps that's been part of the problem. Chen smiled slightly. Too many decisions made by those who see only strategic objectives, not the greater context of our existence. Zevek studied the human admiral. There was a depth to him that defied the hegemony's clinical assessments of human psychology. You requested this meeting for a reason, Admiral Zevek. I assume it's not to exchange philosophical observations. No, Zevek agreed.